What's up, nerds? This is the Align in the Stars podcast. My name is Jordan.
I'm Matt.
And we are here to talk about some Star Wars and some Star Trek today. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So,
what have you been reading? What have you been doing?
I actually finished Master and Apprentice.
Hell yeah, dude.
Actually did it. Although I hate to say it, but it took me about 6 months. And so it was really kind of a fascinating read, especially at the end. Like, the one thing I kind of took from the book was there was kind of a lot of foundation laying. Really kind of getting you to understand, like, who Obi-Wan was as a young man. Who Qui-Gon was as he's being approached to join the Jedi Council, which is really fascinating because we know that he didn't take the position, right?
Yeah, we knew it from Phantom Menace.
Yeah, and yet the whole time you're like, is he going to take it? Like, he's going back and forth, and his prior, I guess it was Dooku's first apprentice that he had, who he wound up having a bond with, who wound up, the story was kind of revolving around that character in the end. And he's a Jedi, but not your typical Jedi, which is really fascinating. And so, in the reading of the book, a lot of it's kind of coming back to me now. Even as I was reading it, I was kind of like, oh yeah. I'm terrible at reading books. Usually when I get into it, it's go time. But, I mean, this one's just been kind of a weird one to pick up and go. So, yeah, the overall, my thoughts and impressions was really well written. You felt like the characters were really genuine. Like, Obi-Wan, even as a young man, you get the sass. You really get the sass, and you get Qui-Gon being Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
And the thing for me is it really, really, really made me want to read Dooku. I know that the two books are really well connected. They reference each other quite a bit from my understanding. And so definitely the plan still is for Dooku to be the audiobook for the kind of coming up. And so, it was a great book. So you said you might have a couple questions.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
I think we should do a Master and Apprentice, solo episode where we just kind of talk about it, so I won't go too far into my questions about it, but a couple things that stood out from that is how do you like in Master and Apprentice, one of the moments that stands out was Qui-Gon's inner voice,
his inner monologue.
There's this one scene where he goes, "Force forbid," and then he goes, "I should really stop thinking like that if I'm going to be part of the Jedi Council."
Yes.
And then he goes, "Is that why they want me on the council?"
He had a lot of those little, quips. You just get the sense that he's different. He really is different. And I think that's what makes the tragedy of Maul killing him, what makes the whole Skywalker saga possible. Right? I mean, if Obi-Wan didn't train Anakin and it was Qui-Gon, you would have got a much more balanced version of Anakin, I believe. I really do. And
or a much more
rebellious.
Rebellious and full of himself Anakin, considering how much Qui-Gon believes in the prophecy.
Yes.
That's probably going to go to Anakin's head.
Yes.
Even more than it was just being passive in the movies.
Well, and they touch on it a little bit in the Clone Wars TV show. But the book really did a good job of kind of talking about the mysticism and almost like the pseudo-religion that the Jedi kind of follow. And they don't really talk about it too much. I'm curious if the High Republic is going to kind of delve into that a little bit. And because there is some mysticism. You hear you hear Han, that old religion? Right. In the beginning of, A New Hope. And you hear him referred to as wizards and stuff like that. And so, you really kind of digs into Dooku specifically and his fascination with the prophecy.
Yeah.
The prophecy was a big deal to a lot of people, just not to the Jedi Council. And I find that incredibly fascinating. And I wonder where that disconnect happened.
Is Sifo Dyas in this book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you got him.
You get him just a little bit.
But he's struggling with something, right?
Yeah. And I hate to say it, you're going to have to forgive me. I cannot remember. That was mid-book. And that one I'm just really kind of struggling with right now.
you get a little more of that in Dooku.
Really?
Sifo-Dyas had that premonition about needing the clone army.
Right.
And so he's a Jedi who is stricken with these visions.
Right.
And is tormented by them.
Mm-hmm.
And his master helps him out with that.
Right.
So, without going too far into stuff, there is a heavy connection to this, to Dooku,
mm-hmm.
to the High Republic.
Really?
Yes. So
how interesting.
I'll do like two more. The multiple prophecies you get in that book. You get more of the written prophecies outside of just
the chosen one.
The chosen one.
Really?
In it's not in Master and Apprentice where they have the Kyber that's not Kyber.
Yes, they definitely do, and I found it really interesting. And they only just kind of glazed over it though, and that was kind of the problem. They
listed a whole bunch of them.
They did, but it I guess that's kind of the Star Wars thing. I kind of, I never really thought about it, but it's kind of reminding me of the moment in Rogue One when Jin and Cassian Andor are getting the data. They're in the vault room or whatever it is, and they're starting listing through all of these different projects.
Right.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
that's a very Star Wars thing to do.
There's some connections that have been drawn with the ones that were just mentioned as well in there. I have forgotten like the theories on those.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating. Like as soon as they were read off, I listened to that section 3 or 4 times. I'm like, okay, where's the parallel? Where's the connections? What can we know is like, this was seen like. I'm like, there's something here because these are ringing a lot of bells.
Right. Interesting.
Also, how do you like the Kyber that isn't Kyber? Obi-Wan turns on his saber and it's orange all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a cool twist.
That was a cool twist, for sure.
But also, like, it's not quite Kyber and it sort of
works like Kyber.
It works like Kyber, but it also protects against Kyber.
Which is really interesting. I honestly had a hard time following that part of it. The one thing that I really took was the parallels that it drew to Fallen Order, specifically Cal's lightsaber, because they really want you to have the double-bladed orange lightsaber.
And just the customized.
And the customized function, but they really, like, every promo, everything for it has him with the orange lightsabers.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And at least from what I took from when the game came out, when I played it, everything was just, I wound up having dual orange lightsabers because it was badass. But it reminded me a little of that. Obviously, it's, the Kyber in that case is more of like, I can't quite explain why it's orange.
Right, and it doesn't actually last.
Right, exactly. As a saber, exactly. So, I wish I could answer that one a little bit better. I had a little tough time following
I definitely like the idea of having that parallel of, like, it's not, we get, Kyber, it's a rock, helps channel the Force, and you get a human-made defense in the Beskar.
Beskar, exactly.
You have this man-made way of defending against lightsaber attacks.
Right.
To have a crystal that forms, it's similar to Kyber, that also is a shield against lightsaber. Its connection to Kyber, it strikes me as kind of cool. It's having that parallel.
Yeah.
That yin yang of that. That's kind of a cool idea. I don't want them to go too overboard on like weaponizing or like using it as defenses, obviously, but
shields or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that's a cool like thing to touch on. It's like, hey, this is a crystal. It's so similar, but it's like the antithesis of the saber.
Right.
So it protects against that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And as you've been talking too, like I've been thinking a lot about the Kyber crystal, and I wonder if it shares any properties. Like, obviously not, like Star Wars and Star Trek, but a kyber and a dilithium crystal are pretty damn similar in what they do.
Yeah,
that might be something we have to talk about later. That's really interesting.
So, without like going in too far into Master and Apprentice, the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the beauty of it. It's such a great book. It was so well written, and that's the thing that I really appreciate about the Star Wars story group is that their stories are very cohesive. Like Legends and the Expanded Universe is one Palpatine clone using another super weapon after another, or Luke turning to the dark side, or Mara Jade turning to the dark side, or I mean, there was just no cohesion. There was no
also it was left. So I'm assuming that it would be left open for other stories to be told.
Right.
So there's no like feeling of a concluded story arc outside of like a trilogy of books,
specifically Thrawn.
Yeah,
and that's because Timothy Zahn knew what he wanted to tell and told his story.
Was able to tell like his own little bubble story of Star Wars,
and then was able to redo it again.
Yeah,
and do it even better.
Yeah,
somehow.
Not only one trilogy, but two trilogies.
And then we got it's insane to think that Timothy Zahn is going to wind up writing 4 or 5 Thrawn trilogies. It's nuts. It's his character, and he gets it.
So good.
And we get to see a live-action Thrawn here soon. I mean, come on. This is just nuts. So we diverge. And then kind of the other thing that I've been doing, it was kind of... I have been watching a lot of other sci-fi of late, just kind of expanding the horizons. Matt turned me on to Westworld. It's insane. It really is insane. I kind of went back to an old friend. I watched Chuck when it first came out years ago. It is just as campy. It is just as ridiculous. But it's a lot of fun. Just kind of, it's nice. But last night I was like, you know what? I can't go to sleep. Let's put on some Star Trek. And so I put on Discovery Season 1. It is fantastic, especially knowing the characters the way that I do now. Lorca is such an interesting captain because you want to like him. There's a moment when he's talking to Stamets right before they make the jump, the final jump. Like they make the 136 jumps around the Klingon vessel.
Yeah.
Right. And Stamets is like putting his life on the line for that. And, you know, he's standing there with Stamets in the shuttle bay looking out into space. And you catch this moment with him of like, whoa, like even though you know in the rewatch, like he's a bad guy,
right?
You're still like, wait, dude, come on, like don't be so awesome like that. And then to use that awesomeness to immediately flip it into the mirror universe.
I remember watching that scene and going, oh, either something's going to go wrong or Stamets is going to die.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so I mean, it's been great so far. It's been a lot of fun just kind of watching it just to watch it, without kind of looking at it in any sense. Like it was kind of on in the background, and so I wasn't paying full attention. Tilly is really funny in this season, and it's kind of low key. She's very funny, but low key, like almost pathetic. And it's great because Burnham is in the same position, and you know, see where she is now as captain of the Discovery, to where like when she shows up and Saru's threat ganglia come out, it's just like, So it's been awesome. That's kind of what I've been doing. So what you been up to? What you been reading?
So speaking of reading, I've done quite a bit of that over the past couple of days. Starting on the smaller side, I finished up the 2015 Darth Vader comic.
Oh yeah,
and that is such a solid story. As a brief like overarch, Tag survives the Death Star.
Really?
He wasn't on board when the Death Star goes. He's in charge of the Executor.
Interesting. And
because of Darth Vader's failure of the Death Star.
Oh, that's right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tag is actually made his boss.
Yes.
And Vader has to follow his orders for a while, right?
Yes.
And Vader hates it.
He hates it.
Hates it. Oh.
And in the meantime, you have Dr. Silo.
Okay. Yeah.
Who has clones of himself.
That's
so
right.
if he dies,
it's
another one wakes up.
Wayoon, yeah.
Exactly. And there's a whole bunch of Vader replacements.
Wow.
So throughout the series, you have Darth Vader going up against these Vader replacements.
Interesting.
And it is very cool.
Is it Palpatine like challenging Vader to get better?
It's essentially him going, look, like you're either the strongest or you're not.
Wow.
Like if you are, good. But if you aren't, one of them is going to take your place.
Ooh, so that kind of gives me a little bit of a feeling of Starkiller in the Star Wars Force Unleashed games. Very interesting. Okay.
And so you get this Vader being a badass. You get Aphra tied into this. I have yet to start the Aphra comics yet.
Dr. Aphra's so good.
Seeing Triple Zero, NBT, and essentially, it's the story of how Vader gets the Executor.
So cool.
And we know he gets Executor.
Yes, he does. So cool.
So, spoilers. He chokes Tag out.
Not surprising, because that's how we met Tag. So.
And then it immediately goes over to the next guy. I'm forgetting. It starts with an O. The guy you see in Empire Strikes Back, who Vader then chokes out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh God. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So Tag gets choked out, and then so the guy who gets choked out in Empire Strikes Back comes up, and he's like, "How long is the Executor going to take to be fully operational?" And he's like, "Oh, that could take 2 months. Because we don't have the manpower." And he goes. And then Vader goes, "You sound an awful lot like Tag." And he goes, "2 weeks, sir."
So good. Love it.
I'm like, it's so funny knowing his fate as well. It's like he gets choked out shortly later. It's like, and the best part is Vader goes behind the Emperor's back on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Creates a droid army. He's obsessed with finding out about Luke Skywalker.
Yeah. Specifically how Boba was the one who gave him that information is incredibly fascinating.
Then I also, speaking of dark,
nice.
I finished reading Into the Dark, which was Claudia Gray's newest book.
She's such a great writer.
And yet again, it's a very good young adult novel set in High Republic.
Yeah.
And you're introduced to another villain, which we might see at some point. I don't know, physically see, but they are probably going to be a recurring villain within the High Republic.
Okay.
They're very, very interesting. You see people struggling with the direction that the council has. You get people struggling with what does it mean to be Jedi. And in this arena, in this world where the Jedi are pretty just for the light.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to be a way seeker and step away from the council, you can do that.
That's so cool.
Like, that's a thing that one of the characters struggles with. Another one struggles with emotion. Like how when his master is killed in 25 years earlier, how the Jedi treat death and not allowing them to grieve, not to feel sadness, anger, not to grieve for the loss. Yes, they're part of the Force, and it opens up a lot of. You start to see some of those seams.
Okay, so
which is interesting.
That was the question. The only question that I had for you at the end of this book was, are you starting to see those seeds of what happens to the Jedi later on?
Yeah, I won't go full in because a lot of that is just opening like a couple chapters.
Okay.
Is you're introduced to these issues.
Right.
And the story is obviously where the characters go with these struggles.
Right.
There is a lot of points where I can draw from where we are with the High Republic to those cracks expanding so much that they're a problem by episode 1.
Interesting. I like it.
Like, there's already a couple ones. The best part of reading these books is going, okay, these are like, this is the height of the Jedi.
Right.
But you can see the critics like, how is this going to go? Oh.
Right. Cool.
So,
cool.
I'll leave it there.
Okay.
But there's also other tie-ins with other comics.
Okay.
I also started reading the High Republic comics.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that is just as good.
How's the artwork?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It is fantastic. I should pull up near the end of this podcast, I'll pull up the quote that is said when a Jedi Padawan is knighted. We don't actually see that.
No, we don't.
In the movies.
No, the only time I think actually the only time that was when Kanan got knighted. Yes, but that was done by the Grand Inquisitor when he was portraying what he was as a Temple Guard, as like the Master Temple Guard, or no, he was the Master Lightsaber instructor, wasn't he? Yeah. So but even then, that was done as more like a Force vision at the Jedi Temple in Fall, which is very fascinating. But did he say the same thing?
I don't remember exactly what he said.
Ooh,
but
we should find out.
I can. At the end of the podcast, I'll bring it up, and you can tell me if it's the exact same thing.
Love it. Sweet.
So, yeah, I love where the comics are going. I can't wait.
Awesome. Sweet. Yeah, I'm going to be, the Dooku is next for me. And then I'm going to be doing, found out that you can buy the book and get a discount on the audiobook as well. I like physical media. I've actually never really been a big audiobook listener, but I think it works because the amount of commute that I have every day, 2 hours a day, you can probably put down a book in less than a week.
I mean, there's a dinosaur book I have going on. That's 10 hours, so that's only like a couple trips for you.
Yeah, I mean that's literally a week.
Yeah.
I commute for 10 hours a week, and so that's insane. Well, that's cool. Well, cool. I guess the one thing that has been the one constant over the last couple episodes is like the random, I guess, crossover between Star Wars and Star Trek from a character who was either on Star Wars or on Star Trek, who's been on the other side. So I've been watching one of my favorite YouTubers play through on Knights of the Old Republic for the first time. As I was listening, he's like just a minor character. He gives you a mission when you first get to Dantooine, and you're outside of like the Jedi Council chambers. And I was like listening, and I'm like, wait,
I know that voice.
That's Neelix. And so I went in and I actually Googled it, and sure as shit, it was Ethan Phillips. And this was like, KOTOR came out, what was it, 2006? I want to say something like that. I mean, it was an Xbox, like an original Xbox release, and then it was redone for the 360. It is really finicky. You can get it on Steam, but you have to mod the shit out of it to get it to play correctly, and it looks like trash. But the good news is, though, there's been rumors in the last week that there's non-BioWare, someone besides BioWare is going in and remaking KOTOR for the newest generation consoles.
I hope that that goes through.
Me
well,
too.
And there's no snares that they get on that.
I mean, the thing is like I was so excited about it because KOTOR 2 was done by Obsidian, who eventually made Fallout New Vegas, which you could argue is one of the best video games ever made. But anyway, so yeah, Ethan Phillips he played a minor character in Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, and Ethan Phillips has actually done quite a bit of voice acting in video games, and he is actually one of the actors that has done roles in a lot of Star Trek. He has done a lot of Star Trek. Which is really, really cool. Yeah. Same with, it's kind of random off topic, but the guy who played Dr. Phlox in Enterprise, John Billingsley, also ton of different roles in Star Trek, which is really, really cool. I like actors like that. Yeah. The Jeffrey Combs, like Wayoon, Shran, and stuff like that. And, oh, so good. So, yeah, that was kind of the one that we were able to find. So, yeah. All right, so we're going to try a segment here. So it's going to be the first episode since episode 0 where we don't really have, like, Mandalorian Season 2 or Discovery Season 3 to talk about. So, one of the things we were like, oh.
What about questions?
What do we talk about questions? Well, and that's exactly it. Questions is a great idea, and I'd love to take credit for it, but it wasn't me. So the idea is we're each going to kind of have one question for each other, and I'm going to be asking Matt a Star Wars question, and he's going to be asking me a Star Trek question. And the idea is we want to kind of spark a bit of a conversation, kind of go back and forth. I have no idea what he's going to be asking me, and he only has a vague idea of what I might be asking him just because I told him that the question was multi-layered. So we're going to try this, and, one of the things that I'm kind of hoping, too, is that, on these subjects, when we talk about these questions, you guys weigh in down below. Like, if you have any thoughts on this, definitely would love to answer some of your questions down below in the comments section. So I guess I'm going to be answering a question from Matt right now, and I'm really fascinated.
So, yeah, I've got one, maybe two questions, because I feel like they could be a little short.
Okay.
Is one... I know we briefly talked off podcast about the Ferengi.
Yes.
And I want to know how much out there is of Quark. What does Quark do after DS9?
So if you want to kind of look for alpha canon, what we actually know, what actually happened based on what's been on screen as of Star Trek Picard in 2399. That Quark is still alive.
Right.
He owns several franchised Quark's bars. There's one on Free Cloud in the episode Stardust City Rag from Star Trek Picard Season 1. And in that episode specifically, Vup, the reptilian character, when he's talking to Rios, when he's going in and posing as the Facer, says Mr. Quark of Ferenginar is very pleased with what you did for him, so yada, yada, yada. So that's what we know from Alpha Canon. In Beta Canon, there was a series of books that came out after Deep Space Nine finished, because Deep Space Nine was never intended to get movies.
Right.
Voyager was never intended to get movies. Next Gen got them just because the original series got them.
You got so close to what you were already doing.
Exactly. Well, and it's the story of the Enterprise. We still haven't gotten a story of a new Enterprise yet. Really. I mean, we're going to get Strange New Worlds, but that's still going to be Kirk. We will see Kirk at the end of that.
At the end, yeah.
Like, we're going to see what leads into the original series. We're going to see Spock become the first officer, right? So, but we don't, like, it makes sense for the Next Gen to get the movies. But Deep Space Nine was given a series of books, and the kind of cool thing was this was the first time that you see Star Trek writers getting together outside of Paramount at the time, and CBS, and it was really when CBS was starting to take over. What's interesting, I can't wait to talk one of these days about the history of Star Trek and how it's almost died 1,000 times. And how CBS and Paramount and, like, if you guys don't know this, Lucy from I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball, is single-handedly the one reason why Star Trek exists to this day. And it's insane to think about. Like, Lucy.
I love Lucy.
Lucy, I'm home! Stuff like that. Like, there's this strange, like, thing where at the time, Star Trek was so, like, compartmentalized.
Sure.
You exist. The Star Trek books that come out, they report to Paramount, and Paramount's like, whatever. Yeah. Sure. Right, whatever. We don't care. It's beta canon. Once again, like I said, the thing that Star Trek does really well is defines their canon. If it's on screen, it's real. Everything else is beta. And so the writers got together and put together a series of books, and I think it was like 13, 14 books. I mean, you're talking like...
That's several books.
Several thousand pages. Yeah. Like the Millennium series alone, I believe, is 2 books, and each one's like 500 pages. And it deals with an alternate reality where the wormhole flips DS9 into a different reality, not the mirror universe, but a different reality. And it's really interesting. And it kind of it's the first books in that series. And you're starting off the new series with 1,000 pages.
Right.
And what it is basically the story of DS9 after Cisco falls and Kira takes over. About halfway through the story, Bajor joins the Federation, and there's a whole book dedicated to Kira trying to adapt to becoming a Starfleet captain. She's not just Major Kira. She's not just Colonel Kira. She is Captain Kira.
Captain Kira.
There's not...
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good, interesting way of, this former terrorist...
Yes.
...entering into... I mean, you can't get more official in Starfleet
than a captain,
a captain.
And at that time, still, like, DS9 is still considered very much an important flagship outpost.
Yeah.
Because of the connection to the Gamma Quadrant. But kind of to go roundabout on that one, what happened with Quark specifically is... he continued to run his bar, but then started using his connection to Rom as the Grand Nagus.
I mean,
it's Quark.
It's Quark.
Of course.
He's the last vestige of Ferenginar.
There's nothing. Yes. Oh, that was such a great scene. When he forces rent to be paid for store. Anyway, so he's beginning to manipulate that, but even then, they don't really touch too much on it. For as much attention as the Ferengi got paid to in DS9 specifically, I thought it was an incredibly interesting story arc. I don't think that any species got such a full story arc outside of like the Founders and the Dominion and the Bajorans, right? Like the Ferengi... What we knew at the beginning of the Next Gen, like they were the principal enemies of the first 2-3 seasons of the Next Generation until the Borg came in.
Annoying as hell.
But from what we saw there to what we see at the end of DS9, where like what we see at the beginning of DS9 is women. What are you wearing clothes for? Like it's like it takes. Why are you wearing shoes in my kitchen? To the farthest extreme. And, to watch, Moogie, go and single-handedly through her love to Zek, change the way that women are viewed in Ferengi culture.
Yeah.
Like, they're able to basically, their equivalent of voting is being able to go buy something.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's also so Ferengi.
It is so Ferengi.
It's like we can make profit too.
Yes, and I really want to see more.
I want to see more. That's why I really do. Because I'd like to think that Quark's still gonna Quark.
Quark will always Quark. Yeah.
Quark will always Quark.
Yeah.
But that he's at least doing the people took him into consideration and he's doing well.
Right. Well,
he's given some love.
And I would love to see we're about to come up on the short trek season. Have you watched any of the short treks outside of Q&A?
I
really should.
I did Q&A and the I think it's the first one with the Mars attack, right?
Oh, so the one leading up the Children of Mars. So lead up right to Picard.
But I haven't because I wanted to make sure that I got through a majority of classic Trek.
Right.
So that there wouldn't be anything that would show up unexpectedly and possibly.
Yeah, the first season of Short Treks was really done around Discovery seasons 1 and 2.
Okay, so
and so you would,
all.
and then and so that's really, and then the second one was done more around Discovery season 2.
Okay,
and so I mean, you don't really need a whole lot. There's a couple of cartoons in there, like Ephraim and Dot. Which is a really interesting cartoon. It's about a tardigrade, and it's pretty cool. And Dot being one of the Dot, I think it's a Dot 3 or whatever it is. So the Dot 3 befriends a little tardigrade. It's kind of cool. But you should definitely watch the Short Treks. But the point that I was trying to make though is I think that that's a great medium for like a quick little Quark story. Like Armin Shimmerman, who had portrayed Quark. Yes. Still, like behind the makeup, it doesn't matter, but he still looks the exact same. He
does.
He hasn't changed in 30 years. Like it's kind of scary in a way, And so, and he has come out and said that he would love to reprise his role. I mean, who knows what Picard season 2 is going to lead to? There's an entire world. You have the characters from Next Gen, DS9, and Voyager all still alive at that time. There's 21 characters that you can pick from to play with. And I would love to see either a Short Trek or running into Quark or having to deal with Grand Nagus Rom, like stuff like that. I would just love to see that. That'd be pretty amazing.
I think you're right. Yeah, Short Treks would be like an excellent way of going in and like looking at. I mean, that way we could even get other characters.
Yes.
Who brief. I mean, depending on who shows up in Picard season 2.
Exactly. And think about it this way too. Like you have everything from Enterprise era. You can do a Short Trek on anything from Enterprise era all the way up through the 33rd century.
Yeah.
And pick.
Yeah.
One of the best stories in the Q&As was Calypso, which was the very first one, and it takes place on Discovery 1,000 years beyond where they're at now.
Really?
They were already thinking about this at the beginning of the show. Ooh. You need to watch Calypso.
Okay, I will watch. I'll watch it now.
Oh yes,
I'll watch them now.
Good,
all
good,
right.
Awesome.
I am going to leave it as that one.
Good. No, what good conversation there. I love it. All right. So the question I have, and it's kind of multifaceted.
I'm ready. My body is ready.
Your body is ready. All right. So without context too much, Palpatine had many apprentices.
Yes, he did.
Maul, Dooku, Vader, right? Maul, which is interesting, is he took as an apprentice while he was still an apprentice under Plagueis. Now, the question I have is, in all of the machinations of the Sith, right, 1,000 years of planning, corrupting, planting seeds here, planting seeds there, doing this, doing that, and doing the other, with everything culminating with Plagueis setting the stage for Palpatine, Sidious, to take over as the Emperor of the Galaxy.
Right.
Okay? So all the machinations that had happened, all the fingers and all the pies, culminates with Palpatine and Vader and their 30-year run as the rulers of the galaxy.
That's actually a couple shows have run longer than that.
Very true. So for 1,000 years, all of this happened. Now, I find it very fascinating that, yes, it only lasted for 30 years. But as we know from our own history, it's not surprising, right? Power begets power.
Yeah.
So the question I have is, in all of the machinations that he had, which one of the three of his apprentices do you think had the most impact across the entire timeline of the Skywalker saga?
Across all of the Skywalker saga.
Correct. So that can include Anakin, young Anakin, Vader, and old Vader. Because the reason I asked that is because all of them had different parts to play.
Yeah.
So which part to play was the most important? Was it Dooku and the Confederates, or the Confederacy of Independent Systems, right? The droid army, rise in that, fulfilling Sifo-Dyas's plan, right, on the other side,
right,
was it Maul, right, who across the entirety of everything, had bits to play with Vader, with Anakin, with Obi-Wan, with Mandalore, which has connections right now to the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Okay? Or was it Vader, who was the fist of Palpatine, who wiped out the Jedi? Who had...
And you're talking about, and this is a question on the playing their part in Palpatine's plan.
That's correct. Which of the three...
As much as I love Maul, I can't say it's Maul. Maul was essentially the in-between guy.
Right.
He was the guy who was going to pull the trigger and to get the ball rolling.
Right.
But outside of that, he didn't have much of a role. At least from what we know, he wasn't going to be playing much more of a role. Maul was, Dathomir. He didn't come from royalty. He didn't have a whole bunch of power. He was already angry at the Jedi.
Right.
And so as much as of an impact he had in the stories of all these other characters, when it comes to Palpatine's plan, he actually gets negative points because he tried actively to subvert it and stop Palpatine, which just is an amazing
so cool
point for his character. Where he is evil, he is bad, but it's so Sith because it's so personal.
Yes,
it's so focused on himself that getting in his way is a strike against him. It's a blow against him. And that's a grudge that he holds. He uses his anger. I would say, Maul is probably one of the best Sith.
Right.
Because he takes that so personally. He takes his feud with Obi-Wan all the way to Tatooine.
All the way.
He tries to kill. His goal on Mandalore was to try to kill Anakin.
Yes.
To take Anakin out of Palpatine's hand.
And real quick, while we're in that moment, okay, think about that for a second. In that moment, he reaches out to Ahsoka and says, "Hey, join with me. We can stop this." And do you know the only two that could have stopped it? Maul and Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Right? But because it was Anakin who he revealed to be the one that says no.
At some point, we should talk about how would Anakin have reacted. If any plea, any argument that Ahsoka would have would automatically deteriorate because Maul's there as well.
Correct.
The presence of Maul makes it the same thing that Ahsoka says is that we can take down Palpatine, but only for Maul to take his place.
Exactly.
That's the ultimate end result for Sith.
Right.
Is power, whether using it, yes, to kill Palpatine, good, but it's for selfish reasons.
Absolutely.
So we can't say Maul.
Right, of course.
Tyrannus.
Yeah.
Tyrannus is really close to me wanting to say Tyrannus being the powerful ruler of his planet.
Serrano, yeah.
You have that power that's centered around him, that you can have this former Jedi is a power and a voice in the galaxy saying, look, I stepped away from the Jedi to take care of my people.
Right.
That's power. And so in a galaxy where the common complaint that the Republic is slow, it doesn't get stuff done.
Right.
you have this powerful person who stepped away from the protectors of peace to protect his people.
Right.
And then calling on other worlds to join him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's be honest. The Confederacy, the
CIS, the Confederacy of Independent Systems.
Yeah. Is a good.
They were right.
And also I kind of like when we see it in the Clone Wars, I like how they conduct their meetings.
Yes.
How they go into assembly.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense.
It does.
It is so close to being right. And the little Palpatine just goes in and just pours a bucket of salt into it.
He salt bays it
because
from across the room
because he orchestrated it.
Yes.
So,
but now the question that I would have for you on that is, if it wasn't Dooku, Tyrannus, could anybody else have done what he did to take the Confederacy of Independent Systems to what they became?
No, because again, Maul, you got Dathomir, you got the Night Sisters, you got Mother Talzin.
Right.
That's its own issue there. Anakin, he was a Jedi, but he doesn't have any power or influence on worlds.
Right.
On calling onto people. I mean, Dooku had that spot where he gave up his training, his role in Jedi, because he was highborn.
Yep.
And because he was highborn on this planet, that he has that authority, he has that opening to create something new for Sidious.
Mm-hmm.
But the big but is Anakin has an ass. No.
Nice. Sandy.
Is Anakin. That's the big issue.
Right.
It's gonna be between Tyrannus and Vader.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't have the success of the Empire without Vader.
Correct.
You could have had the same with Tyrannus.
Mm-hmm.
You could have. But once Sidious had Anakin, so close to the dark side, that you just don't need Tyrannus anymore.
Well, and what's interesting too is that you see through, Pelagius is a book. It's part of Legends, but it's
so close. It's so close to canon. It's like because it hasn't been explored.
It hasn't, so, and Pelagius is it's a really great read.
You just have to just have the whole thing with Maul's origin in one ear out the other.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the only thing in Pelagius that doesn't line up. Right,
pretty much. I don't remember if Sifo Dyas lines up.
He doesn't really line up as well. I mean, James Luceno is the one who wrote the book.
Right, but it's so close.
It is so close. One of the things in that book is Dooku's vision for what he thought, when he overthrew Sidious, because every Sith is looking to overthrow their master, right? His thoughts for ruling of the galaxy were incredibly fascinating. Not through fear. Mm-hmm. He was just going to use the power of the Sith to control, but to really just lead in such a way that's beneficial for all people. And he always wanted to use his position as a count, as the leader of Serrano, basically, to... Like, he'd rather rule through his natural positioning, being a highborn, versus, using the Sith power as a power source. And so it's interesting. And so the reason I asked the question is because everyone automatically goes to Vader.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you've gone to the person who I think has actually been the most effectual, because as I said earlier, I don't think that the CIS, the Trade Federation and all that, they wouldn't have gotten to the level that they were at without him. And I would argue that no one else could have risen to given the Republic such a run for their money to the point where they had to create the clone army, right? The clone army was created to compete. Who executed Order 66?
This is the big part of the question.
Yes.
Is what part of the plan is the most valuable?
Right.
And it's hard to go too far into the analysis of ifs, what ifs, and that stuff, because ultimately, I mean, look, the events of Episode 1, how the Trade Federation failed with the blockade of Naboo, played right into them becoming part of the CIS.
Exactly.
So ultimately, that failure becomes a plus into the next movie, and onwards and upwards into any failure of Tyrannus replaced by Vader.
Right.
So it's hard to go into like, well, if this didn't happen.
Right.
So taking at what actually happens, you have Vader, who is the fist of the Empire, who, yes, fails eventually.
Right.
He fails with the Death Star. In the dark side, he fails again at the Death Star.
Yes.
Keep Vader away from giant circular space stations.
Exactly.
Is what I'm saying.
He's more machine than man.
He's the character who the longest plays into Palpatine's plan.
Right.
That despite going behind his back, and obviously would be plotting to kill the Emperor.
Right.
You see that in Episode 6. What Vader, Anakin did at the end of 3, killing the Jedi,
right,
wiping them out, being this shadow across the Empire to destroy hope, like you just like literally just make things worse for people who are less fortunate and enhance and enrich the people who do, who have fortune, as long as they're on the right side of the political spectrum.
Sounds familiar.
Versus Tyrannus, who is the final nail in the coffin of Jedi standards.
Right.
If the question is, as you said, playing into Palpatine's plan,
right,
I do have to go with Vader.
Okay.
Because you got 30 years of most being loyal to the grand plan.
Well, and in the end, too, he Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. The Sith had a 1,000-year plan to get revenge for the Jedi wiping out the entirety of the Sith.
Right.
Vader was the one who finished the plan.
Job. Yeah.
He finished the job. Yeah. I
agree. Now, if we're talking about the biggest impact,
right,
to the Jedi, to what leads to the fall of the Republic, I would say that it is Tyrannus,
right,
because him being the ruler of the rebellion,
yeah. I mean, it was just a different rebellion.
It was just a different rebellion.
Yeah.
But him being the leader of this conflict that ultimately turns the Jedi's morals and ideals and just punches a big old hole through.
Yeah.
Because the Republic needs them and they turn into warriors. I think that is the death blow for the Jedi, is that yes, Vader and the clones killed the Jedi,
right?
All the Jedi, but they were on their way out. They may have already been dead by the Clone Wars,
right? Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Vader on the plan.
There you go.
Aspect of that.
And that was the question, right? Yeah. I mean, what's funny is it always comes down to it, like, you know, it's the Skywalker saga, right? It really is the story of Anakin Skywalker and his kids and what happens to everybody. And it always comes back to Vader. Yeah. And
it does.
It always comes back to Vader. And I was hoping, like you mentioned, that, you know, you talk about how Tyrannus had his part to play, which is a huge part to play. I mean, I don't know, once again, without speculating too much, and that's where the theory side of things, that's where we maybe dork out by ourselves.
Yeah.
But, you know, the parts to play, and I just found it very interesting with all three of his apprentices, how they all had this very interesting part to play. You know, Vader being the fist, right? He's the one who completes the plan. Tyrannus being the manipulated, the person who never really had a chance at the throne, right? He never had a chance. He was never destined to overthrow Sidious.
No.
He was never given the chance. Like, Vader only had a chance when he was Anakin.
When you have your master also being in charge of the opposite faction.
Yes.
You aren't winning that war.
No, you're not.
And he
knew it.
Yeah.
And he knew it, but he still fought. Yeah. Right? And then Maul.
I have an analogy for you.
Yeah.
Maul was the trigger. Tyrannus was the powder. Vader was the bullet.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah, and it's so cool. Like, 1,000 years came down to 3 apprentices in the end. You know, and
3 movies, 3 apprentices.
Discovery, 4 seasons, 4 captains. Well, that was awesome. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
So the question that I'm going to pose to the people on the podcast listening, what are your thoughts? Who do you think had the most impact on the grand scheme of the 3 apprentices? Is it Maul? Is it Dooku?
Give me your Quark fan fiction. Wait, no.
We don't. Something about Umox just came to mind, and I don't know. But definitely, like, let us know. Let us know what you think.
Yeah,
like,
if you have questions, you might hear them on the podcast.
Absolutely, we might even call your name out.
Yeah, we might answer your questions on the podcast.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think that's what I got for this week. You got anything to add before we finish her up?
No.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you listening. We really do encourage you to like the video, subscribe, click that bell to get notifications for when we actually do release these episodes. We are on SoundCloud. Links to SoundCloud, Twitter, and Facebook are going to be down below. Leave comments as well. We'd love to hear from you. So until we talk to you next time, do you want to finish her out this time? So for reference, the quote I believe that we're going to be doing is what is said when a Jedi is knighted, correct? Oh, right. I love it. I love it.
So I'll say this by how I have the actual one to end the podcast.
Awesome.
So for in the comic, it is by the right of the council, by the will of the Force, I name the Jedi Knights of the Republic.
100% correct from Rebels.
Hell yeah.
I love it.
So, all right, cool. That's the connection. So,
thank you guys all so much, and we can't wait to talk to you soon.
For light and life.